Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does the nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to catalystsale.com/game, you can find more information. My catalyst today is Kyle Poyar. Kyle is an operating partner at OpenView, and he is a leader in the PLG space. If you don't know what PLG is, PLG stands for Product-Led Growth. Kyle, it is awesome to see you and finally meet. I've enjoyed your content. I think that most people will know you or be familiar with you around the information you're sharing around product-led growth. And we'll get into what the PLG acronym stands for, even though I've said it, and how that's impacting organizations. But great to finally meet you and see you.
Well, appreciate the kind words, and nice to be on the podcast.
So what is PLG?
PLG, or product-led growth, and PLG is actually a term that OpenView coined back in 2016, which is the year I joined OpenView. We think about it as an end-user focused growth model where the product is front and center and how you acquire, retain, and expand your customers. You can think of it, though, as a dimmer switch rather than an on or off switch. So product-led growth is really a set of principles around how to grow your business in a way that delivers a better customer experience and is more scalable. And so instead of looking for, hey, where can we add people to solve a problem in our funnel, it's, hey, how do we actually turn these into product solutions? And so happy to go deeper on that. But I guess zooming out, back in 2016, we had been seeing these companies that were really outliers in the best possible sense. They were growing extremely fast. They might have even accelerated growth as they reached scale, might have even been profitable while they were growing in these extremely fast rates. And we were like, what are these companies? And there was a lot of talk about freemium or bottom up or viral companies, but these just seem to be phenomenons. And each of these companies that were doing it just seemed to be doing their own thing. We wanted to codify, hey, here's the characteristics of how these companies work. And here's just about any software company can learn from, what it means to be like Slack and apply those principles to their business.
And you just named one that I think a lot of us will be familiar with, Slack. And I know that some organizations are moving over into a Teams environment, but Slack is a big one. The first time I came across Slack was back in 2000 and I'm going to say it was 2000 and I'm going to be off on the time, but probably that 13, 14, 15 time period. Let's just say it was someplace in there. And it was the engineering team inside the organization that brought Slack into the company. And there were some themes that came together. One, the people who were leading up the team didn't want to work with salespeople or deal with salespeople. They wanted to be able to operate on their own. It started as a small group and then started to expand out. And that is that a fair summary of some of the core tenets of what product-led growth means inside organizations? Exactly.
I think the starting point is you want to build to solve end user pain and not just executive buyer pain. And so, when you can solve for end user pain, you actually just open up who can discover your product. Maybe you reach tens or hundreds of people that could see value as opposed to just one person where everyone is competing for that same executive buyer's attention. And so for Slack, it's, hey, I just hate this constant barrage of emails. Like, I want to be able to message with my team in real time. And folks say, hey, raise my hand. I'm in engineering. I want to use Slack with my team, or I'm in marketing. I'm in sales. I'm whatever role. They discover Slack. They just start using it for free. And so I think the next thing is deliver value really quickly, and deliver value before you capture value is a kind of core aspect of PLG. And then to me, there's still a role for sales or for customer success, but it tends to come with, hey, once there's multiple teams using Slack and you actually want to expand Slack across the entire company, you maybe want to start leveraging the data that's in your Slack instance or start to set up smart automations between other systems in Slack. That's when you're going to probably have a conversation with the sales team about an organization-wide account. But you're doing that, with customers who are already using the product and seeing value. And so it's a really kind of a partnership type of sales environment as opposed to any sort of combative sales environment.
I think that's one of the things that's really powerful. My background is in ed tech or learning enablement type technology. So specifically around learning. And one of the challenges we'd run into when we implement a new program, and the company I was at was SmartForce, and we were acquired by Skillsoft, but we'd see this implementation death spike is what I would refer to it. We'd launch, there'd be this big, huge fanfare. We'd get a bunch of people using the product, and then all of a sudden, nobody would come back. And what is cool about the product-led growth motion and the things that you see in these kind of applications, because of the value that's being delivered early on in the process, immediately in the process, you see higher levels of engagement. And another one that folks might be familiar with, Notion has done this really well in the way that it gets adopted inside organizations and then starts to unlock opportunity because there's more and more people using it. There's more and more value that the organization is getting from it. So I'm super excited about this approach. Is this more of an evolution? Is it a complete change in the way that we think about business as far as how software companies go to market? How are organizations handling the transition and the thinking around this approach?
The first thing is, you're seeing a lot of startups really take advantage of this idea that end users have been an afterthought in software buying. Like for a lot of companies, they really single track with the executive. They have a very lengthy sales cycle, with a lot of back and forth, a lot of demos, a lot of discussions with procurement, with legal, with security. It might take months and, lengthy implementation before users ever really get to try out a product. And users might never end up really adopting it, which means you really don't even see the value that the executive bought in the first place. And so PLG companies are saying, hey, speed is really important, and actually delivering a product experience that end users want to use is critical to seeing value company-wide. And we as consumers, or we as kind of business users, are consumers at work. We are used to really great experiences with our B2C technology, and we have the same kinds of expectations for technology at work. And so you start to see tons of companies start to take advantage of this phenomenon, right? They start to build with the end user rather than just the executive. They start to solve these problems, and all of a sudden, some of the traditional software companies might not even be evaluated by a buyer because their team's already using another product. And so they don't actually need to go through a lengthy evaluation. They're not looking at multiple tools. It's just about extending something that's already working. So there's really low risk, and you're able to grow from this really strong foundation within an organization. And so I think that as traditionally enterprise-focused companies have seen this play out in a number of markets, you're seeing really kind of sales-led businesses, small and very, very large, try to pivot their business model to try to be competitive with these PLG startups. I think some more successful than others, but to me, it's fascinating to see this intersection where the companies that were traditionally not PLG are trying to be PLG. And then the PLG native companies are also realizing that there's a big opportunity to add things like sales, add things like proactive customer success to expand where they've had an initial toehold in an account. So you start to see this blurring of the lines. And I personally think that PLG is just going to be a part of building any software company. Like any company needs a PLG strategy. Some are going to be really reliant on it and kind of all in on PLG. But regardless of who you're selling to or how big of a deal size you want to target, I think that, to be competitive in the next 5 years, you got to think about PLG.
Yeah. What are some common mistakes that organizations make when they start thinking about a transition into PLG? So let's just say that I'm in an organization that's already gone through more of the traditional go-to-market models, got those longer sales cycles inside. We're focusing on executives doing the top-down kind of thing, or land in the middle and figuring things out. What are some of the common mistakes, though, that organizations who have traditionally gone to market that way and are starting to think about a shift to a more PLG approach, what are some of the common mistakes they're making?
Well, one is just that they think about it as, hey, we've got to launch a free product or a free trial. So they think of it as like more of a pricing change when it's really a company-wide DNA change. If you just launch a freemium product or free trial, put it out there, you could end up just cannibalizing folks that would otherwise talk to your sales team. So sales could be a really big detractor for it. And you might, frankly, just not have the best self-service experience. Like you might have not honed that freemium or free trial experience so that users see value on their own without talking to someone. And so you could start to say, hey, this traffic that we have, routed into our free flow, like it's just not, the folks are abandoning, they're not doing anything. Sales hates it. Like it sort of can become a death spiral in an organization that thinks about it the wrong way. And there's a lot of ways to correct that. But I think that the first thing is really think about how every team needs to be participating in product-led growth in order for it to be successful. And just pay a lot of attention to the product experience and how quickly you're delivering value to users in a self-service way, and be really honest with yourself. So you can, add product analytics to get really granular look at what folks are doing in the product. In fact, I'd say like product analytics in a PLG business is kind of the equivalent of Salesforce. Like it's your system of record for what's going on with your customers, and just make sure that you're putting even more attention to things like UX and product experimentation than you probably expect that you need to make.
Yeah, it's not as simple as going out there with a free tier that may or may not be super differentiated from your paid for tier. And then all of a sudden you get into these situations where people start to wonder, well, if I can get this for free, why am I paying for the other piece? Or there's this risk of creating a lot of confusion in the marketplace. And I like the focus on alignment across the organization. I mean, as we have, one of the cool things that's happened across these teams and revenue teams is you're starting to see more and more specialization at the right time inside those organizations. One of the benefits of specialization is understanding what's happening with the customer at each of those pieces inside the journey. If you're having a PLG discussion inside your organization and you've omitted some of those customer-facing teams, you're likely making a mistake. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, while a sales team might be resistant to the idea of PLG, like there are ways to bring sales along and to incorporate all that they've learned from interacting with customers. Like they've been on the front lines, they are the voice of the customer. And so if you don't even listen to their concerns or make them part of the process, you're going to be setting up the project to fail, frankly.
One of the most common things that you hear across sales teams is we'd like to have better leads, or we'd like to have better conversations with the right people inside organizations. And I can really think of no better way to get ourselves into a position to do that than to have conversations with the people who care about the people who are already using the product inside the organization. So I struggle with the reluctance that is out there in the market where people are worried about how this is going to impact them versus how it's ultimately going to impact the success of the business and success of the market, which should, if doing things the right way, have a positive impact on them.
Totally. Well, I want folks to imagine, like, put yourself in the shoes of a business like Expensify, which is an OpenView portfolio company.
Yep.
So Expensify has, a suite of like mobile-first expense reporting solutions. They've also got financial products. In the early days, their tagline was just expense reports that don't suck. So what happened is, your road warriors, your sales reps, your customer success folks would be just fed up with manual expense tracking and using spreadsheets, having to save their receipts, staple them in their expense reports, like submit them in person. All of this sounds so outdated, but that was my life as a consultant. And they say, hey, why can't I just take a photo of my receipt, have everything categorized manually, compiled for me, tracked for me, and then just, email that to the person that needs it. So Expensify has free apps and free tools for these users who are heavy users of expense reports, and they start sending expense reports to the person in finance who has to approve them. And so all of this is without a sales rep coming in involved. But when the finance person starts getting, tens, hundreds even of expense reports submitted, they start getting really curious, like, what is this? I've got a lot of people in my organization using it. They're asking for it. They're pounding on my door. And all of a sudden, this person comes in. They already know how the product works. They already have this sort of set of champions internally. And you can really partner with them and educate them. Hey, here's actually why it benefits you too. You can put up kind of smart tagging, or you can have automatic, direct deposit to pay folks once you approve their expense report. You can have integrations with financial tools. And so it can become a really fast sales cycle with extremely high conversion rates. And you can just get a lot of these because you're able to just open up the top of funnel and have so many users across so many different companies try out the product. So from a seller standpoint, like there's no more highly qualified lead than someone who is already using your product and getting asked about adopting it company-wide. Like that's a lead that most sellers would kill for. And so I would encourage you to think about, like, how do you make your business have a sales motion that's like Expensify's?
So when investors start to look at valuing companies that are in this space, do they start to shift their definition of value from more to eyeballs and number of people who are using and some of the adoption metrics, or do we continue to focus on revenue numbers? Like, how does that dynamic start to shift as investors look to value organizations who've adopted this kind of motion?
I think the first thing that I think about is, as OpenView, where we invest, it tends to be what we call in the expansion stage. So as companies have found product market fit and are ready to scale their customer base, scale their teams.
Yep.
When you look at evidence of product market fit in a company selling to the enterprise, 6-figure deals, maybe even larger, you actually need a lot of revenue to prove product market fit, because your big customers could all kind of look different. They could all have their own different requests. It might not actually be all that repeatable until there's real revenue to show for it. In a PLG business, you're able to really open up the top of funnel, generate a lot of users who end up being active in using the product. You can even survey folks and see how they're using the product, or look at product reviews, look at product usage information. And that all serves as a great signal of product market fit and an indicator of a lot of future monetization potential to really start to charge folks, or start to work with these folks who are really happy with the product to have expansion conversations. So in a PLG business, product market fit becomes much more about consistent product usage and seeing the folks that join get to an aha moment in the product quickly, and then continue to use the product week after week or month after month, and ideally start to bring other folks into the product. So showing word of mouth growth or showing virality within the product is a really strong signal. And I would absolutely say looking at product usage data is a much stronger signal for PLG businesses of their long-term value than just revenue. And so if you're thinking about building from a PLG first mindset, think about how you can attract, users and signups in a scalable way, but also look at the engagement of those users. And that's going to be a signal that you've really nailed it and you're ready to add fuel to the fire.
And it also seems like this can create some really strong alignment across the organization, because now we're getting direct feedback from customers, whether they're providing it in a qualitative manner or it's just quantitative data relative to usage, where you start to get a sense for where's the value, where's the stickiness, where do we need to continue to improve or enhance or develop or design from a product perspective, rather than one of the challenges that I've seen out there is when you've got a really engaged sales rep, whether they're on the account executive side of things or an account manager or customer success role, they come back and say, my client needs this. My client needs this. And many times that's an N of one tied to a single deal. And it can create a level of distraction inside the organization where this motion gives you access to data that's more informative than the N of one. And even in the N of one discussion, I could describe a fork as a 4-pronged metal eating utensil. I could say I needed a tool to eat with, or show a picture of a fork, and those are going to be received differently from an engineering team. So is this a path that creates better alignment across an organization? Are you seeing that in the companies that you work with?
Well, in the best PLG companies, there absolutely is this alignment, and it's the product team can build just better products because they have so much more information about what folks are seeing value in, how they adopt the product. They're able to double down on things that folks actually care about and are using. They're able to improve things that folks try out but get stuck on. And they're able to even kill things that just aren't getting the adoption that they're expecting to really streamline the experience for everyone else. But, it does still require work to have this kind of cross-functional DNA. So on the support side, right, like, do you have a way of tagging all of your support tickets or creating a feedback loop between what support is hearing and the product team? And that's something that, it sounds great on paper, but it's actually hard to, build that build that feedback loop in. Or if so much of your product experience happens on a self-service basis and you don't have that seller that has the relationship, that has, those in-depth customer conversations, how can you actually supplement that and go out and proactively reach out to customers and kind of who's doing that work? Or how can you, watch session recordings or use the quantitative analytics to just have more customers understand from their perspective without the seller? One thing I will say, though, is that there are still opportunities for misalignment, even in a PLG business. And we can talk more about that. But one that comes up regularly is on the marketing side. A lot of times marketers are focused on generating signups. Like, how do we get more folks to sign up for the product?
Okay.
But, your product teams, your growth teams are thinking about, hey, how do we get these people that sign up to reach an aha moment or to eventually convert in the product or, hopefully generate revenue in the long term? And what I tend to see happens a lot of times is if marketing and growth or a product are, really looking at separate KPIs, all of a sudden marketing, spends a ton of money on paid ad campaigns of folks that are low intent or maybe even bots that, sign up but don't do anything. And so I do think that it's still important to think about shared KPIs and ways to have teams work together, because this can break down even in a PLG business.
What are some of the shared KPIs that you'd see in a healthy organization to help avoid some of that misalignment? And then I would like to get into some of the traps that are out there. But what are some of the KPIs you're seeing that can help reinforce that alignment?
A key one is activated signups. And so looking at that number of folks who not only sign up, but do something within their first couple of days in the product that indicate they've actually reached an aha moment or seen value. And so this way, marketing is trying to drive signups from folks that are actually going to do something. So signups that are qualified and interested. And your product team is trying to improve the rate of how quickly can folks get to an aha moment, or how do we get more people to do this on a self-service basis in the product. But both teams are trying to improve the same metric, which is, I think, a great thing overall. Or looking at KPIs like just overall revenue rather than just self-service revenue, right? So if a product team, say, gets credit for self-serve revenue and a sales team gets credit for enterprise or sales assisted revenue, then all of a sudden, if someone churns out of the self-serve funnel into enterprise, like, that looks bad for the product team. Or if an enterprise seller has a conversation with someone, it's all great, but that customer decides, oh, I'm just going to put my credit card and buy. I can just do this in the product. This is great. I'm already sold. And then that person is, hey, why don't I get quota relief on this deal? And so I like to try to have that shared understanding of, hey, the goal is revenue for the entire business and doing what's right for the customer. And self-serve versus sales assist, it's just a channel. And we can be channel agnostic if we're improving the business.
Yeah, it's really powerful stuff when you start looking at it and say, how well are we aligned with the broader objective of the organization, whatever that objective is. And it seems like in a lot of organizations, whether we're talking about early stage organizations or even some later stage organizations, we tend to create these silos where we want to build up our empire and defend all of the things that we're doing and hit on the important things that we're doing rather than what the overarching mission or objective is of the business and how well that aligns not only across what we're doing inside the business, but how it aligns directly with what the customer is looking to do. And then the third level is how our people go about executing on their role. So let's say I'm thinking about this, everything that we've been talking about has been on the business side inside the organization, things that we're doing with product, data that we're starting to look at within product. How does this translate into, beyond the usage data that we see on the customer side, how does this translate into customer interactions? And I think where I'm going, or the question I'm trying to get out is, how can we better, in this kind of motion, how can we better engage with our customers so that we're assisting rather than getting in the way?
I think the first thing is just emphasizing that self-service experience. So making everything that should be available self-serve, available. So if someone runs into a question in the product, instead of needing to reach out to support, which, they should have that option if they need it, but can support start to say, hey, why don't we surface up a help article if someone's on this kind of screen? Or, hey, here's the kind of questions folks run up against when they're trying to set up an integration. Can we make it, much easier to integrate the product here? So having a mindset of self-serve first, or how do we automate these interactions so we don't fall in love with the interaction, we fall in love with customers seeing value in getting their problems resolved. I think that's first and foremost to me. But then I think about it as, you want to be able to deliver, the right interaction to the right customer at the right moment on their terms. And so, that's allowing the customer to opt into maybe a demo flow or a sales assisted motion. So having that as an option is great, because some folks, hey, they just immediately, they have questions. Maybe they have an active project, or they're looking at another vendor. They're not sure if, hey, do you do things like security reviews? Do you have an SLA? Like, if you don't have a way for them to get in touch, that can be a problem. And then you can start to get proactive and use your product data to surface up what we call qualified leads, or PQLs. Yep. And these are, indicators based on product activity and other information about the account that, hey, based on what this person's doing, now's a really great time to reach out to them. And here's a message that you should use. And that's a way to actually help out the account, help them achieve their goals. And, you tend to see, if you can set up these PQL sort of triggers or PQL plays in the right way, it feels really natural for the customer. The response rates are extremely high because, really just about helping them and going on a shared journey with the customer.
That, to me, is one of the things that gets me most excited about this evolution. And I think it's an evolution. I mean, if we're out there truly solving important problems, helping organizations, solve important problems in their business, then we should design and align with being able to do so. And we should be able to get some really clear data that says, yes, we are, or no, we're not. And if we're not, then let's adjust. And if we are, let's do more of it. I really like how you highlighted the importance of delivering the thing, whatever the thing is, at the time that's necessary. So delivering the thing at the right time in the right, how did you say it? Did you say context, or the way that they want to receive it? That is pretty powerful when you start looking at the thing that comes to mind to me is landing a plane on an aircraft carrier while it's in heavy seas and there's wind. Like, how do we figure out those variables so that we coordinate effort to accelerate speed to impact inside organizations rather than just going fast around in circles?
Exactly. And I think it's this idea of meeting the customer where they are and recognizing that while you want to be as product-led as possible, the goal is to use product-led growth to improve the customer experience and be able to scale as an organization. And so I think there's a lot of really interesting ways to pair a PLG strategy and all the data that you're collecting on customers with really smart and personalized interactions.
So let's talk about a bit more about that. Like, what does someone do with that? So, okay, we've got data. How can we pair with personalized interactions? Are there examples of companies that are doing this really well that you like? Similar to the Expensify story on the top of funnel activity with a bunch of reps out there taking pictures, having a good experience, and now seeing this motion. Who's doing this well? What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've recently interviewed folks at Zapier and at Webflow around their sales assist or kind of sales plus PLG motion. I've been talking to a lot of other folks about it. And while there's some commonalities, I think a lot of it is looking at folks' data and where there's friction from their customer experience and letting that inform the plays that they're going to run. And so one example is a lot of folks start off totally self-serve, but they notice that customer support are getting questions like, hey, can you fill out my 80-page security questionnaire? And that's just not ideal for a 5-minute support interaction. It's a signal that someone has serious intent, they're ready to buy, they need more help, and your approach is actually adding friction to their buying experience. And so, I guess first thing is giving folks, I call them hand raisers, a way to raise their hand that they need extra help and getting them to the right person in a really fast way. And so I think having an experience for hand raisers is a really great first step. It's low-hanging fruit in your base. Another opportunity that comes up is folks start to look at their signups and what they're doing in the product. And there's a portion of folks that are, tech savvy, or maybe they're at a small company, maybe they're buying for themselves, and they are totally comfortable with the self-service experience. Like, it works great. They don't want to be harassed by a sales rep. But then there's other people who sign up that maybe they're signing up from a company with over 500 employees that, just by that nature, they're probably going to have extra security questions, or they're maybe not going to have the ability to set up things like integrations on their own. Can you identify that someone is, one of those accounts that typically doesn't get to an aha moment on their own and needs extra help? Can you start to say, hey, would you want a 15-minute call with an onboarding specialist for us to walk you through the product? Or, hey, can we help set up the product on your behalf? And the interaction is probably not with the seller at that point. It's probably with more of a customer success or customer support type of persona that really is saying, hey, once we get the customer adopting the product, we can then have a sales conversation later, but we don't want to put the cart before the horse here. And then other things that come up are just looking at product activities that indicate a serious intent from the user, where they've signed up, they're doing something where they're clearly very interested, but also a commercial opportunity. And so this again might be things like that someone is in the product, they set up, they've done X amount of usage in the product, and they've invited 10 people on their team, but all of a sudden the self-service cost is getting so high that it might be more than they might want to put on their credit card. This is someone that maybe you want to help move them into a committed agreement, help them go through procurement because they're about to trip into a procurement issue with their organization. Or maybe it's someone is trying to set up an integration that is a complex one that they could set up badly or the wrong way. And you just know, hey, if someone's trying to do this, they're really serious, but this is also a really important thing for their business to get right. And we can offer help, and even just an email to say, hey, here's a step-by-step set of instructions for how to do this. Give me a quick call if you want me to walk you through it. Like, that kind of interaction doesn't feel salesy. It just feels like you're able to provide them with the assistance they need at the right moment in their journey. And you really open up a two-way road.
I am really excited about this evolution. And again, the reason why I'm really excited about the evolution is a lot of times inside organizations, we feel like sales is something that you're going out there and pushing and doing to organizations. And really what we should be doing is enabling those around us. We should be enabling those who are struggling with a challenge that's not part of their core role. They've got other work that they need to do. And if we can, or not part of their core business, they've got other work that they need to do. So now the technology that we're delivering becomes an enabling thing for the business to help enable the business to do things better. And we don't need to make it as complicated as I think we do when we get into these motions of let's put together giant proposals and RFPs and all of the other things that where traditional or historic sales might have taken place. But the thing I like is that it's so much more focused on the customer And what we forget is the customer is the one who has the problem. They're the one who needs to solve it, not us. We can help them, but really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah. And an opportunity is, hey, you might even be able to avoid an RFP situation entirely if a team starts to use your product before, the level of scrutiny comes into play, where it's a big enterprise purchase. They're just going to continue with what's working, and you can kind of slide it under the radar. And I think that's where a lot of vendors, they say, hey, our win rate's really high, but they actually don't realize they're missing out on all of this opportunity that's happening. It's not even bubbling up into an RFP or into a formal sales process.
So how about the misperception that's out there? And I'm kind of leading this along, but how about the misperception that's out there that that PLG deals are small deals, that these are all like super transactional. I'm paying $10 a month to Slack or $18 a month to Slack. And as a small organization, that is going to be small and will remain small. But is that a misperception? Do people believe that these are all small deals, and then there's this reality on the other side that folks aren't talking about as much?
Well, PLG deals are land and expand deals in my mind. So they might start small, but PLG companies have higher net retention rates, and the self-service purchase or the initial purchase is small, and there's a huge amount of opportunity to grow the overall spend in an account. And you could look at Twilio as an example, very successful company in the developer tooling and API space. Twilio has like 10 million developer accounts on the platform, but they have a group of hundreds of customers that pay them above $1 million a year. And a lot of their revenue is influenced by these biggest customers. And it's not necessarily because Twilio is landing $1 million contracts, which they are in some cases, I'm sure. But many of these are folks that grow with Twilio over time. They start adopting one product via self-serve. They find success with it, and all of a sudden they're rapidly expanding, buying multiple products with significantly more usage than they had when they started. And so I'd encourage folks to think about this as opening up access to try out your products, really opening up the funnel and being able to expand that highest qualified and most successful customers to kind of cherry pick them and turn them into much bigger deals.
So are there companies where this just doesn't make sense, where it doesn't even make sense to consider a PLG type model?
Well, there are industries where it's certainly harder. I don't know if it ever doesn't make sense, because I keep being surprised seeing PLG pop up in all instances, but it might not make sense for your specific product the way you built it. And so if your product only, really provides value if everyone in a company is using it, or if there's a lot of like really sensitive customer information, or someone wants to install it, on premise behind a firewall. Like, I think that there's so like very security conscious products or products selling into like the healthcare space. There's just going to be a harder time adopting PLG. But what I've been finding fascinating is there's still a lot of ways to take advantage of PLG principles, and companies are disrupting even these spaces by having a fresh perspective on the problem. And so an example would be in security, we're used to products that sell to CISOs with this idea of like, hey, security folks are not going to try out a product. They're really risk averse. They don't want to add something else to their environment without really having a ton of confidence in it. But Sneak has said, hey, developers are actually a big underserved audience in security. Developers are writing code and they often are getting slowed down by security professionals who get in the way of them, releasing updates. I think that what Sneak's found is, hey, let's actually put security into the hands of developers as they're building applications. And that way we actually serve developers and we serve security pros. It's a win-win. And so you're starting to see these folks take a fresh approach and be able to go more product-led in the spaces that you might never have expected. And one other favorite example of mine is Safety Culture, which they have a set of products around kind of safety inspection reporting. So they're selling to folks in blue-collar industries, maybe manufacturing, construction industries that a lot of people work in, but are historically underserved by technology, or where there's outdated assumptions that these folks are maybe less technically savvy. But safety culture has thousands of safety inspection templates. And so if you are, facing a problem on the shop floor, you might go into Google and say, hey, we need a safety inspection checklist for X. And they've got checklists that you can even print out and start using manually. Or they say, hey, why don't you just start using this, tracking it in safety culture? Hey, you can invite someone else to do it digitally. You can use it on your phone. And then, hey, do you want to store this so that you can prove that it was filled out and that you're compliant? And do you want to get analytics that you could share with your boss? There's so many things that allow you to deepen your relationship with safety culture. But I've been fascinated that they've been able to take this really smart PLG play to industries that folks would say, hey, this is just not a digitally savvy industry in the first place.
It's really cool. It creates a lot of organizations are talking about different ways that they can innovate and different ways that they can diversify and different ways that they can be creative in either creating better customer experiences or expanding the business or whatever their definition is of innovation and creativity. And this provides a really interesting way for organizations to test ideas and concepts. And again, it comes back for me, the dots that I'm connecting are how this really can amplify things that you're doing from a marketing perspective to address some of the top of funnel challenges that you run into so that we can get to the point where we understand what resonates. And then now we can start thinking about how do we deliver those inside maybe some of our larger organizations that we're working with that are may have been adverse to adopting something shiny inside their business. So really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. One thing I'd encourage folks to think about on that note is on your marketing budget, how much are you spending on going to trade shows, sponsoring events, wining and dining prospects, maybe on studies with Gartner and Forrester, tons and tons of money spent that reaches a really narrow audience. And could you deploy some of that budget towards product solutions that add value to your target user and help you be discovered in their moment of need? And an example would be HubSpot, which now has, they're all in on product-led growth. They've got freemium versions of all of their products, very big focus on self-service. But before they had any of that, they had their website grader, where you could put in your website domain, and they gave you a bunch of analytics and feedback about your website performance, security issues, how it was doing from a marketing standpoint, and just a bunch of smart recommendations for how to get better. They've actually ended up grading more than 4 million websites. So it's something that folks would share with other people, would post the results publicly. And it's an incredible marketing tool because once you have that data and you have the URL, so you know who the prospect is, you could say, hey, look, you didn't score that well in XYZ. Did you know that if you use HubSpot, you could get better at X, at X? And what could that do to your business? And so you could think of this as a product as a marketing channel and as something that would actually not only add value to the user, but open up the door to a sales conversation in a way that just being at a trade show or sponsoring an event or writing a white paper just doesn't really have that same kind of an impact.
Kyle, this has been an awesome discussion. Thanks for the level of detail, the specific examples of where you're seeing things work out and the things that you're excited about. Where can people follow you, find out more about what you're working on and what you're sharing in the marketplace?
Well, first off, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so folks should definitely follow me there. And then if you want to learn more about product-led growth, I've got a bi-weekly newsletter called Growth Unhinged. You can sign up for free via Substack. And then otherwise, just make sure to check out the OpenView blog.
Awesome. We'll include links in the show notes. If you know of somebody who would gain value out of listening to this conversation, appreciate this conversation, please share it with them. Let Kyle and I know via LinkedIn. We like seeing those sharers. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?